So, we waited just for a while before starting because we knew more people will join us. Hello, everyone. You have a couple of questions on your screen and also in the chat. Please feel free to tell us a bit about yourselves. Where are you coming from? What's your role? And why are you here? Hopefully, not only because there was nothing else to do tonight, but actually because you're excited to be here with us. I am Lavinia. I am dialing in from Bucharest, Romania, and I am the co-founder and learning architect at Offbeat, which is a platform where we are supporting learning and development professionals to upskill, to grow the impact they have in their role, and also to save some time for themselves. And we are meeting today to discuss a very, very important topic for our profession, which is the intersection between neuroscience and learning design. Hello from Ethiopia and Canada and Peru. Hello, everyone. Keep the messages coming while we do this very short intro. Hello, Ines and Maria, Portugal and Germany. So we're here from all over the world. Hello from Bucharest, Romania, close to home. Okay, so I'm very passionate. Oh, from New York as well. Hello, good morning. I'm very passionate about the subject, but I have probably 0.5 the 0.5 experience compared to our guest. Hi, Benoit from Canada. Compared to our guest, Lauren. So I can't remember when was the first time that I met Lauren, but I knew that there was so much that I could learn from her. And I can tell you that even now, I think it's been a year and a half, every time I meet her, there's something new that I live our meetings with. So I don't want to, we're adults here, I don't want to introduce her. So I would like Lauren to give you the mic. And if you can tell us first, who are you?
You know what I've decided to do? You thought that you were going to surprise me. I've decided I'm going to surprise you instead. I can in the chat. Is there anyone out there who already knows who I am? Can you just say yes or no in the chat? Let's do a little social experiment. Yes. Oh, fabulous! All right.
We have a yard, so
Benoit, Donna, Lisa. All right, you guys, let's check your memory. I don't need to tell everybody about me. Put one word in the chat that would describe Lauren and the Learning Pirate to everyone else here, and I'll fill in the blanks. Lavinia, are you cool with this? I know, just like
100%.
Social experiment on the fly. Don't be afraid. Grandma? I'm not a...
You didn't expect this.
No, sorry. So Lauren knows the context of why I said grandma, just by the way. Not that Lauren is
grandmother. My grandmother. I am not a grandmother, but yes, I do speak about my grandmother a lot. Brainiac, prankster. Okay, this is a great sort of, if we just put those, like a grandma pirate, neuroscience, brainiac, prankster, neuroscientist, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Got it. That's who you are.
I feel like I should fill in some of those blanks. So no, I'm not a grandmother, but part of the story. I don't even want to touch that one, Benoit. So you might have to explain that later. For those of you who don't know me, I'll tell you why grandma is out there. I am not a grandmother, but a lot of the research that I did early in my neuroscience studies was for my grandmother while she was still alive. It's after I did my foundations in neuroscience. I studied medical neuroscience because my grandmother was still with us, but you know, she had Alzheimer's and she's suffering from dementia. And it was very important that that woman just was my heart. She was my soul. And I just wanted to stay connected with her as long as I could. So I studied medical neuroscience, and a lot of the workshops and the keynotes that I do, I pay homage to her and share some stories about my time with her, and the time that we had left. So yes, I'm not a grandma, but I had a great one. Born Canadian. I think I'm pretty much a global pirate by now. I'm actually sitting in Ireland again right now. Those of you who are over in England, if you're going to be at the World of Learning tomorrow, I will be flying in tonight. Can't wait to see you there. And basically, I'm your resident brain nerd who was a CLO before I left my last post in corporate. Decided that neuroscience was the way forward in learning about our brains, because like many of the people who I've spoken to globally, we just never thought about those things much before when we talked about learning or how to learn. So my introduction into the sciences was really my own self-experiment. And I wanted to come back into our community of learning and development professionals and say, oh my gosh, I think I found a better way to do it. Guys, wait till you hear about all this stuff about the brain. And now 6 years later, triple certified in neuroscience. My board of advisors grows by the month. And I am just honored to represent the scientists who I represent, and also to be part of our community and be part of the advocacy for science and the evolution of it. Great. Yar. Oh, awesome. Wait, that's what we have to, wait, hold on. In the chat, you guys put the word yar, but there's people here who are not going to know what yar means. So in the chat, what does yar stand for? If you know the answer and you're at the World of Learning, you'll get it. Oh, there we go. Lavinia. Okay, Lavinia gets the t-shirt.
No.
Yeah, Patricia.
Let's see. Let me stop the share. So for everyone who joined us for the first time, joined a session of ours for the first time, I think I was telling you last week in an email I sent that we are quite informal as a community, and we welcome questions in the chat, and you can take yourselves off mute and just ask questions. In today's format, I prepared a bunch of questions for Lauren, but feel free to jump in as well. We're gonna do that for about 50 minutes, something like that, 45 minutes maybe. And then, yeah, hopefully you're gonna leave with something. So this being said, Lauren, you mentioned that you were a CLO before you jumped into studying neuroscience. Can you tell us what triggered you to be interested in the brain?
Pure accident, quite honestly. I was at a conference in Toronto, and I was asked to open up for one of the keynotes. And I looked at the title of the keynote session. It had something to do with neuroscience, and then I was like, what? Wait a second. Hold on. What's that? Why should we know about it? And after the keynote was done, I was like, so I've been teaching and been this job for, I don't know, almost a couple of decades, and I know nothing about my own brain or how this thing works, but yet I'm here responsible for learning and for designing learning for others. And that was it. That was absolutely it. And yes, I was CLO at the time. I think we've talked about the CLO wasn't even a thing when I was a CLO. I still can't tell you really what a CLO is. I know that I was responsible for 2,200 employees across 120 accounts. If this sounds familiar to anyone's world right now, go ahead and just say yep in the chat. And that was it. Once I was introduced to the fact that we could use the sciences, then there was just no turning back for me. I deep dove very quickly and wanted to learn as much as I could. So started off with reading a few books, then started off with my certifications at Harvard. And then it was a rabbit hole into that dive. And that's kind of how I got into it. Like I said, there's a very personal side to it as well. I think anyone who knows me, who's heard me speak before, knows we can talk about learning all day, every day. We're definitely going to talk about some design and some design tips, but if you don't, as learning professionals, if we don't see the value of understanding the thing doing the learning and the remembering, then maybe we shouldn't be in this industry.
I'm gonna live this for a minute here, this message, because I think it's a very, very important one. And I know from my experience, lots of my former colleagues were extremely excited about learning, but they were coming maybe from other business functions or from other HR functions. And the first thing that I always tried to nudge them to learn was, learning how to learn themselves even, and learning about their brain, just like you said, with books. And because you mentioned books, I have to ask you, is there a book or two that you would recommend to everyone here to read?
Oh man. I mean, there's so many different ones.
Break. We lost Lauren. Can you hear us?
That was bizarre. Yes. Are we back with you guys? That was very weird.
No worries, you're with us.
Okay.
An alien there.
I'm not going to say anything bad about AI right now, but just in case it's brain freeze. Yes, computer brain freeze. Sorry, you were asking. Can we just go back to rewind a little bit? That
Yeah, I was
distracted me.
asking about books because you mentioned that you started your
yes,
journey with books.
One of the first books that I remember picking up was How the Brain Learns by David A. Souza, and he's a translator. And it was a great basic fundamental book for me to sort of get started, but where I really gravitated towards and where I still do. And I think this is a really great way for people to get into learning about the brain, but in a not so aggressively scientific way, is there's what we call like our pop science books. Now they're still grounded in real science. All the science is true, but they're really cool case studies and stories, either from the neuroscientists themselves or patient accounts. So I would say David A. Souza is kind of a good one, just to kind of get your bearings of a little bit of how we learn. But you really want some interesting, like, how does this thing work? And even more so, what happens when it's not working? An author by the name and a scientist by the name of V.S., like Victor Susan Ramachandran, won't spell that for you. I was enamored with his work on phantom limbs when I started studying. And phantom limbs, for those of you who don't know, that's when a part of the body has been amputated for whatever medical reasons, but then the person still feels function or has hallucinations about the limb still being there. And it's absolutely phenomenally fascinating. Then there's, for those who are interested in more in behavioral sciences, but through the lens of the brain, Cassio, I'm going to not pronounce this correctly. Cassiopo, Jonathan, he passed away. I'll give you guys all these resources, but that particular book has to do with the story of two neuroscientists who fell in love. One of them studied love and the other one studied loneliness and social isolation, and they found each other. And I'm not going to tell you what happened, but it's like, I don't think I've ever read a book where I cried and laughed and of course, I'm not going to remember the name of the book. I'll find everything for you guys. But any sort of those pop science books that were actually written by the neuroscientists themselves, I'd say you're in a good place.
I think those are always very good to start with. Whenever you start such a complex topic as neuroscience, I found it so hard to be motivated to learn, because if you jump into research papers, at least I don't know if anyone else had the same feeling, but I feel stupid half of the time. I don't get it. So just starting with the basics, I think it's always so important, and exposing yourself continuously to certain concepts, I think that's always useful. But can I ask, Lauren, once you started studying, and even after a few years, I guess, did you started noticing some of the mistakes that we're doing when we're designing learning in our organizations?
Absolutely, because I recognized everything that I could be doing better, or things. So there was a couple of things that happened the more that I learned when it came to my abilities to be able to design learning. The first thing was that I was able to start understanding how much of what I was doing was already intuitive. I just didn't know the why behind it. So some of my designers out there, once I start putting the puzzle pieces in for them, it starts to make a lot more sense, which means we can start using things a lot more effectively. So that was the first thing. I was like, oh, I do that. Why? But now I know why I do that. And now I know how to use it more strategically and more intentionally. So that was like one of the ways that it started to really impact the design things. But then it was a matter of understanding the brain and understanding how we work against it is just as critical to knowing how to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure everyone here has heard, you've heard terminology like cognitive load, working memory. You've heard methodologies like spaced repetition, interleaving. These are all, all really valid, but there is, there's the methods, but then there's the science behind using the methods themselves. So once you start to sort of fill in those gaps, your design world just becomes, well, I'm not going to lie, it becomes so much more complicated, but in a really awesome way. It's like, it's really challenging, but it's a happy madness, as I like to describe it, because all of a sudden you have all of this and all of this extra information about how we're operating and how somebody else's brain might be taking in our designs. And we're also helping them to create memory. And that to me is the end goal of any one of the designs that I do, is how am I helping somebody create a memory? And with the arsenal of science that we've got, what can I use depending on the context, depending on the topic, depending on the environment, how best to design it?
Can you tell us a bit about this memory piece? I think because that's our purpose, right? To help people create memories. Can you walk us through, I don't know, some fundamentals about memory?
Oh my God, loaded question. It's interesting because I'm getting ready for this presentation on Wednesday at the World of Learning. And, when you've got 30 minutes to try to tell people like some of the best things that you could possibly tell them to help them design, you're so limited. I think there's so many facets of memory. First thing is that we know with certainty, memory isn't just stored in one place in the brain, it's stored in multiple places. When we are engaged in something new for the first time, we are creating these engrams and we're stamping. It's like we're stamping neurons. If you picture like the connect the dot, right? We're trying to connect these dots to try to make that picture. But when we're reactivating or when we're trying to retrieve the memory, the idea is how do we get those dots to connect faster and faster so that we're creating a pathway or a network of memory that represents your behavior, your skill, your ability, or your knowledge. And it's not easy. So I guess when it comes to memory, baseline hard facts are that it takes a long time to create a neural network in someone's brain. It doesn't happen overnight. This is why learning is hard and learning takes time. So that's the first thing we need to understand about memory. The process and the sort of the stages of memory at the very fundamental sort of psychology level, because we look at memory through two lenses. We can look at psychology or we can look at the neuroscience. Then we can harmonize the two. So it's that 3-step process: encode, store, retrieve. Your encoding time is that, focused time where you really are using a lot of energy to learn something. That's the encoding process, the initial stamping of the neurons while we're learning. Then we move forward, we go to the storage process, right? Once we're in the storage process, that's when we're really trying to strengthen those networks. We're trying to get those neurons to fire together again through rehearsal, through repetition. And then final phase over there is retrieval. Can we retrieve it? Can we reactivate it and then transfer it into the context of whatever it is that we're needing to be doing, whether that's work or personal lives? But I think what's important to remember is what is the memory representing when we're designing? What does the memory actually represent? And I like to start from there. Am I trying to help somebody create a memory for behavior, for tangible experiential skill, like a somatic experience or a skill? Is it new knowledge? What is it that I'm trying to create the memory for? Because I think that to me is always my baseline of how then I approach design.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And because you mentioned these 3 stages of creating a memory, do you have in mind some like general learning methods or tools that can be used in each stage, or things that are just general and can be used whenever you want? Or
So when you when you think about encoding as like just sort of you're sitting down to do that initial like hard learning, the brain really needs to be able to focus. So our job then as a designer is to help the brain to focus by using its attentional networks. And so there are several attentional networks in the brain. but how do we guide some of those attentional networks to help somebody focus? So if I am then designing something, I'm really being conscientious of how am I guiding attention to focus? First step, what do I need them to focus on? What do I need their full and utter attentional networks towards? Okay, how am I doing that? Through what medium? Through what am I using, visuals? Am I using auditory stimulation? Am I using like text? Am I getting them to encode memory through writing? Right? I highly encourage, and you'll see this in the series as well. We've got plenty of research from memories now that show that writing things down tangibly with your hands. I know this is like crazy. Anybody who's like under the age of like I don't even know at this point, 35, 40. I know, Benoit, you're laughing at me. But like their hands were, their hands will cramp, like if they're trying to write but it's such a somatic experience that actually does help to encode a memory. So can I insert some sort of writing, physical writing into that to help people to help with those processes? So during the encoding process as well, we really, outside of the fact that we're going to try to help somebody focus, we've got to be very protective of their cognitive load. We can't just fire hose people with information. It just doesn't work like that. So how do we protect the cognitive load, which is very linked to our working memory? And our working memory is limited, right? So our working memory versus our short-term memory is basically everything that we're just taking around us on a day-to-day, second-to-second basis. When we're looking at our working memory capacity, you can think about it about how phone numbers were designed, right? Why did they only have mostly between 7 and 10 numbers in a phone? Because they figured out that the brain only had that capacity to remember, the plus or minus of five plus or minus. Now that's changed a little bit. I think it's like 7 plus or minus 2. But if we know that, then what's the sense of giving somebody a bunch of reading to do? So, okay, just took up some of their working memory capacity. And then instantly we're going to quiz them on something at the end of a module or whatever. Okay, well, why am I quizzing you on something that you haven't learned yet? So boom, I'm like, basically there goes your limited capacity. I've exhausted your cognitive load because I'm asking you to retrieve something that you haven't even created yet. So that's kind of like those two things for that encoding process. Your storage process is really when you want to like get the arsenal of retrieval practices or some types of rehearsal. I don't know what you're designing, so I can't tell you which is going to be the best for that. But things to take into consideration are, sometimes we don't have the luxury. Most of the times, we don't have the luxury of designing in the environment that people are going to be learning in. So we've really got to take those concepts into factor, right? So again, sitting on our side of the table, we've got to think they might be sitting at their desk or they might be in a training room, but where are they transferring this learning to? And how can I create an experience for rehearsal or practice that will contextualize it for them so that they can transfer it into the environment or simulate the environment as best I can?
Got it. Can I ask, because you now mentioned something about our learners, and I believe that what we're missing in general in L&D in learning design, it's time. But I still think that research, it's such an important part, and proper research is such an important part of the whole learning design process. Can you tell us, like, give us a bit of your tricks? How would you do research if everything was possible?
That's something that I needed to learn. It's something that you greatly have to understand how to even go about research, because you go and do like a Google search and you're going to come up with like a gajillion different papers on the same topic. And so I had to, when I created the board of advisors around me, that was like the one step for them to teach me. But when the hospital took me under their wing, they taught me how to research properly. And one of the best pieces of advice that they gave me was, if you are reading white papers, they're rabbit holes. They're rabbit holes of delicious information. They're incredibly complicated, and please don't read them if you don't have any, knowledge about the functional areas of the brain, because you'll go mad. But the best pieces of advice that they gave me was to read one scientist's breadth of work, like through and through. to really understand what they, you know, follow it. Because remember, they're not like us in corporate. They don't just work on something for maybe 6 months or, you know, 3 months at a time on a project. They're working for 20 years on the same thing plus.
Yeah.
So now that in itself can get very in depth. But then the second thing was to look for the review papers. Now, review papers are fantastic because they're culminations of research and they have been like very strictly reviewed by boards. So I'll look for the review papers as well. And sometimes, you know, I've got to go to my board members to gain access to those. But that's sort of like the two things is breadth of research. Basically look at the one person or the scientist that you're greatly interested in, but okay, everyone, my best advice for you, if you want to go down this rabbit hole of research, when you get to the end of a white paper and you see all of their citations and all of the other cool papers, stop. Just don't go there, because you look at all the titles like, oh, that sounds amazing. Okay, highlight, like click. My research folders are massive, full of papers that I still haven't read yet.
Yeah, we have a question from Dan in the
Dan
chat.
Newman coming in strong.
Dan, do you want to go off mute and actually ask the question out loud?
Sure. I just finished driving 2 hours, so I literally just got home and I'm putting away all my board games from a long weekend. So, you know, learning styles, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, we know it's garbage. But Howard Gardner has a more diverse kind of breakdown of those learning styles into multiple intelligences like performative and music and all these other different modes. So I guess I'm curious to hear from Lauren, what are her favorite ways of diversifying how we deliver learning into different modalities so that it sticks with learners in different parts of their brains?
Delicious question. Here's the designer answer. It depends on what it is they need to learn. It's not, you know, it's as simple as that, my friend. Like, you know, I'm not going to, you know, sit people in front of, you know, videos or create like online learning if they're going to be on the floor of a distribution warehouse center that's like football fields long and is like a dangerous environment. So, you know, it really depends what that content is. The content tells us. The end game of the goals tell us. And I know, because there's a lot of us on this call right now, I know that sometimes we need to fight so hard to advocate to do the learning that we know that the humans doing the learning needs, and not what someone who's just said, we'd like training on this. And we're like, but why? Well, we want them to learn that. Well, they won't learn that if we teach them what you want them to. I'm like, this makes no sense. So the modalities are really, when we look at the brain, we think about how many different places in the brain that we have potential to store, you know, a part of that memory. Then we can start like thinking about what are the other pieces of that puzzle? What's the pieces of the design puzzle? What are the environments that they're going to be in? If I'm going to be sitting at my desk versus, like I said, in that warehouse, it's completely different. Those of you who know me know that I worked on a cruise ship. I was the training officer for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. That is a very specific, intimidating, overwhelming environment that you could have shown me a gajillion videos, or I could have watched, you know, Love Boat on rerun, and nothing would have prepared me for being on that ship and transferring in the environment. So the modalities are really dictated by the content and what is that memory that we're trying to create. So nice try, Dan Newman, but I will not fall into the learning styles myth.
Thanks, Lauren. Now, how do you, I see an emoji there. How do you get to know the environment in which your learners need to operate? Like, how do you learn about them? What's your process?
You know, it can be really challenging, as we all know, when you can't physically go somewhere. And the best thing that you can do is you treat it like a scientific data experiment, right? So just like I asked all of you, like, who knows me? What do you know about me? I'm going to go to I'm going to get a sample of different subgroups, and not just from the one environment, but I want to know what everybody else thinks as well around the business. What's that perception, right? Because everything is intertwined. We just don't talk about cross-functionality when we learn nearly as much as we should. So that example I gave about the warehouse, I actually did have to design learning for that environment. And my ways of going about that were, first of all, I want to know who are the humans working in the environment. Fabulous. Now I want a range of them. I don't want the person who's been there for 10 years only, who thinks they know everything. I want the person who's been there for 10 years. I also want the person who's been there for 10 days. Give me somebody who's been there for 6 months. And I'm going to start putting together, because it's not just about, the learning that happens right at the beginning when you come into the environment. It's everything that happens sequentially afterwards, everything that can change within it. So for me to get a better picture, I want to see the experience attached to that across a range. And I will fight tooth and nail with stakeholders to do that in order to get that tangible experience that they had to go through. Most recently, like I said, I used to work on the cruise ships. Most recently, I actually reached out to Royal Caribbean again, because I would love to go back. And this has been in my mind for almost a decade now. So I'd love to go back and redesign that experience. And when I spoke to them, I said, not like I'm not looking for a free cruise. I mean, that's nice. But I said, if I were to come back, I would like you to put me back on as crew on the biggest ship that you've got. On, not because, if anyone's ever been on a cruise ship, they are big moving cities. They are very large. They're very intimidating. But what you don't get to see is what happens in the crew areas. And those move faster than the speed of light. So I said, put me on the biggest, scariest ship that you've got, because I need to feel what it felt like on my first day again, as a crew member walking into that environment.
Got it. Yeah, observation and even tangible experience. If you want to design for customer service, go and do some customer service or observe them, sit around them, and I think that's actually a design practice as well. Okay, so
Crew knows
Richard,
crew. Hi, Richard.
Yeah, a fellow cruise.
maybe we passed by in Alaska once. Should we talk to Romy's question?
Yes. So we have a question from Romy. Romy, do you want to go off mute?
Hi, everybody. Happy to go off mute and see a friendly face. Sure. I'm just always really interested in the links and connection between neuroscience for learning and behavior change. And so I'm just would love, I know you're going to tell me it depends on all these things. Yes, I know. Of course.
I'll give you some deliciousness, Romy.
Thanks, Lauren.
Okay. So, we all know behavior change is not easy, because we've all tried to do it ourselves at one point or another. It's not easy at all. But what I love about it is that it is very governed by very specific areas of the brain. It is also very governed by neurochemistry. Now, the neurochemistry is it's a question mark crapshoot, because all of our neurochemistries are different on a day-to-day basis. What I loved when I was learning about those things, especially when it came to designing learning for it, was that one of my board members, Dr. Nick Hobson, who is amazing. Oh, if you guys want a great resource, Dr. Nick Hobson, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he had a podcast at one point called It's All BS, or It's All a Bunch of BS, which obviously behavioral science, not bullshit. And it's just a really good fun one. But I remember talking with Nick, and I said, what are these things that we need to look out for, right? Especially from a learning designer's perspective. And he's like, well, I always see learning, they're trying to make it engaging, they're trying to make it fun, they're trying to do all of these things, but it's not about the motivation, because motivation is so unstable. And that was one of the best things that I learned about designing behavior change when it comes to, designing with that in mind, which is your motivation is going to change from moment to moment. So I can't anchor that on thinking that I can motivate somebody from the other side of the screen or from the top of the classroom when you've come in and, you're standing at the bus and a car drove by and you're all of a sudden you're got crap on you because straight up and boom, motivation gone. So it's really, when it comes to that behavior, we have to sort of figure out, can we use a little bit more on the emotional side of things? Can we tap in to that emotional connection to stimulate the cognitive, right? So I hate to say the why, but it is a little bit more about the why. It's why are you here, right? I had a gentleman approach me at the conference that I spoke at a couple of days ago in Dublin. And it was such a brilliant question that he asked, because it has to do with this. He's like, what do you do when you have to learn and you don't want to learn? Like, delicious question. That's a great question. And then I asked him, I wanted a little bit more about his story. And I said, well, what's the deal here? It's like, is your job on the line? Like, you know, you don't want to learn out of fear, and you definitely don't want to learn out of stress, because the brain just, you know, doesn't like that. And he was motivated just out of the fact that he needed a job. He needed a job. Now, that was motivation enough for him. And I think I actually turned him in a different direction, because I wanted to understand a little bit more. I said, well, tell me something. I said, you're not motivated to learn. You don't want to do this learning. He was talking about becoming a developer, I think doing some coding. Just so happens I had a friend who just went through the same situation, spent $11,000 on a course for a year, did the learning, got out of the course. He didn't like it. He didn't like it when he was learning it. He wasn't going to like it when he was trying to get a job. So what is that? So Romy, I think like the first part is like, what is your baseline motivation? Because if you're trying to work against it, then you're already setting yourself back, right? Or you need to find, if it is a do or die, or if your job does depend on it, then you do have to sort of find that sort of way, those tiny bites to sort of get yourself along the way. I think a lot of the things when we think about behavioral change, I know Lavinia has heard me tell this before, you know, one behavior that I wanted to change for myself, and I've tried these little experiments. I do social experiments on myself like all the time, but you know, typically you will not get Lauren to run unless there is like a dinosaur or like Godzilla has come up from the wherever and is like, and even then I might not do it. I might just give up. Right? Like, what if there was apocalypse and I needed to run somewhere? So I'm like, well, I'm not going to get up, put on my shoes and just run out the door and like go for a 5K. Not happening. But I was like, this is going to sound so lame, you guys, but I'm like, can I do one sidewalk block? Like, you know how the sidewalk blocks are divided? I'm like, and that's really just like 2 steps. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. Okay, can I do 3? Okay, I can do 3. And just kind of like slowly brought myself up. Romy, another thing when it comes to behavior that I notice, even with myself and when I've put this in for other people, is that we talk about feedback, but we don't talk about giving ourselves that self-praise. And we need to teach ourselves to do that. We really need to teach ourselves to do that. Because when we're talking about behavior, you might be taking something from something that's very subconscious. And our next step, we got to bring it to the conscious realm if we want to be able to start manipulating and changing the structures in our brains, right? To create that behavior. So how do I, when I recognize that in the series, we have this experiment. I talk about the just experiment. I used to say that word all the time. And I was like, I don't want to say that anymore. Like, oh, I just did this, I just did that. I'm like, this sounds really like, you know, I'm bored or I'm really upset all the time. Well, it's not the case. So how did I stop a subconscious reaction from being a conscious, like, I don't want to do that anymore? I made the decision first, this is what I want to do. Bringing conscious awareness to something. Number 2, I put a circle of people around me, said, if you hear me say this, can you just like kind of call me out on it? Because it's going to take my brain some time to recognize in the moment that I'm doing it. Okay. Step 3. Okay, now I recognize that I'm doing it. Like, oh, damn it. Self-praise. Good job. Okay, yes, you said it, but it's cool. You caught it. Don't be upset with yourself. You're getting to the next step here, until it just became a natural thing. I don't say it anymore. And if I do say it, I'm just like, oh, caught myself. All good. So I'm not sure if that's like, Romy, I could talk about this like for eons. So we could talk about neurochemistry, we could talk about dopamine and its role in motivation. Yeah, there's so many little things I could give you. Dinosaur exercise. Thanks, Richard. I love how you guys are really great at distracting me. You're welcome.
Thanks, Lauren. So we have another question. Oh my God, I am gonna pronounce your name so badly, so I apologize already. Kalisa or Kalisa? That's such a beautiful name.
If we're
But
saying it right.
the question is, what key topics would you recommend people to learn about neuroscience and learning at the beginner and intermediate level?
Beginner, I'd say just very foundations of memory. Mm-hmm. Just the foundations, go very surface. That's number 1. I've recently been talking a lot about, and in the series as well, it's kind of a two-pronged thing. I love to talk about metacognition because it's a phenomenal theory and it's a phenomenal methodology. But in order to effectively be metacognitive, you need to have cognitive control, which means you need to help train your brain to focus. So it's learn a little bit about metacognition because that's the way that we can regulate and monitor our own learning processes. But it's a cart before the horse type deal. You can learn about metacognition and learn how that works. But if you don't understand how to stop yourself in the moment to catch yourself, like in those, like I just said, then you're missing the point of how to use, like we're missing the actual skill to use the method and the theory. God, there's so many. I love schemas. I love engrams. I love schematics because it's the way that the brain organizes things. It's how we categorize things from a very little age and how we then, that categorization in our brain sort of gets manipulated as we're starting to add more information to those pieces of the puzzles. Schemas are a really great way to show how we organize things in our brains, but also how that particular thing can work against us as learning designers in particular. It's very hard to sort of veer someone's attention to focus on something that looks very similar to something else they've already got in there. Okay. I can keep going, guys. Like, how many, like, does anyone want to send me some dinner for Uber? We could just actually, no, I got to get to the airport.
You have to go to the airport. So no. Let's see what the next question is, because it's a very interesting one from Praveen, who asks, if you want to go off mute, please do. I know you're here. I can see you.
I can see
going once.
When can we
see yes, hi.
Hello.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Praveen.
So my question is, I generally struggle with this. When can I say that someone has learned something, right? When can I say the learning is complete? Is it just storing information in the long-term memory and retrieving it? Or is it the application of that information in known and unknown situations, right? So
that's a great question. I'm going to say, first of all, we can never say that the learning is complete for somebody else. We don't know. If we're doing demonstration of skill, then yes, then we can say, I'd say, Praveen, probably the most important aspect to the question that you're asking is the time variables here, right? If we can't really judge. If you want to say, can someone retrieve something, but it's for a short term? Are you asking them to retrieve it for you within a day or 2 days, a week of the learning? Or are you asking them months down the road? So long-term memory, if it has made it into certain areas of the hippocampus, that's our episodic long-term memory, then yes, we are able to see, like, even a few months down the road, if they can actively retrieve it in a variety of different situations and transfer it, then yes, we can say that the learning has happened. But I think what we have to distinguish here is that learning and memory are separate, right? Learning is that process that we're going through in order to help create that memory. So I just want to distinguish the two. But I'd say, Praveen, your best bet is to really understand, does someone want to learn something for the long term, or is it training for the short term? And then I can determine how I want to test retrieval based on those time variables.
Sure, Lauren. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Richard.
That was like a very nerdy answer.
The question was actually very good, Richard. Sorry, I'm gonna just talk for just a bit, because I think measurement is also such a challenge and pain for us in L&D, and I think it's a very, very good question. But before I ask about measurement, so let's see. Richard, do you want to go off mute, please?
Do you dare, Richard, after distracting me this whole time?
Going once, going twice. Okay.
Okay.
I can ask it. Again, a very good question.
I'm here, guys. How are you doing?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, okay, so you want to know about stakeholders.
Yes, because, as being an L&D professional, you always have to show your value before you get the opportunity to do it. And I love everybody's unique approach to this. So I just wanted to kind of get an idea of what was your approach to showing the value, so then you can actually be able to perform.
I adore this question, Richard. I've spent the last month on this tour basically in rooms with stakeholders, like slapping them around a bit, just about this question. Again, if they can understand the value of what we do as far as the learning design goes, that's great. If they don't, it's about the design, because we need that time, right? Like, we're usually fighting for time to design something out properly, because usually they want it within a month, which is, we can't even do a proper analysis within a month, let's be honest. So I think it's an advocacy for that process as well, is to do our thorough investigation before we even get to the design. And then, speaking honestly, Richard, I think we've all known this, but we speak to them in their language, which is time and money and resources. You'd be like, you want me to design this within a month? Great. We're going to be doing it again in 3. How much money you've got? So when we've got to repeat this, that's number 1. Number 2, when people don't learn because we haven't given them the appropriate amount of time, and you haven't given us as the learning department the appropriate amount of time to design learning, how much more money do you have in your budget so that process can happen all over again? Okay. Or how much is it worth to you when you walk by your employee's office or your employee's desk and they're on YouTube, or they're on Google, or they're on TikTok, or they're on Instagram because they're looking up something that they needed to learn that you didn't give us the opportunity to help them with? Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And when that all fails, my friend, you can do the really cruel, unusual thing that I like to do, which is you find the 3 objects in the room, you hand them over to that person, you ask them to juggle for you. And when they say, I can't, you'll be like, cool, I'll be back tomorrow and you can juggle.
Yeah, so we're getting some comments in the chat. Can I want to give my 2 cents on this, because I really like the question. I think one of the reasons that we are struggling with this is because the educational system was not so good at teaching us how the brain works, how learning works, and so on. So I think our roles in L&D is also to do a bit of this education. Although it's a long-term strategy, I think repeating things over and over again about, the brain and so on, maybe 10 years from now, for the other generation of L&Ds that will come, it might be better for them. I don't know.
It will, because it's happening.
Yeah.
Slowly, educational reform is happening. Very slowly. But there are countries out there who are now making it mandatory for their teachers to have brain science and learning sciences in their new teacher training.
Yeah. Rocio.
Hi, Lauren, Lavinia. I wanted to know, it's a pretty basic question, but what can we do to become better learners?
That's not basic at all.
What's life?
Let's give you a okay, first is, I think the best thing that I taught myself was to really dive into metacognitive ability. Because if I couldn't stop myself in a moment to reflect, to take the time with whatever it was that I was trying to learn, to refocus and say, do I actually know this? Or do I think I know it? And then try to apply it or try to retrieve it. That to me is like the best possible answer I could give you and to everybody, is if we can learn to monitor and regulate our own learning strategy and processes, that's like the first part. Then I'd say, and there's a bunch of these in the series in Joining Forces. We give you like a ton of different methods and strategies that you can pick and choose from. There's loads of different questions that you could just kind of keep on your desktop or wherever you're doing your learning from, just to sort of revisit. That will help you to understand, am I actually creating a memory here? Am I like really passively learning? And I know it's really something, I think this is kind of like, Romy, I'll sort of bring your question into this with behaviors, and I'll merge it with Rocio's, is when we train ourselves to be more cognitively aware of what we're thinking and what our processes are, then we're in a better position to learn. And it takes me, depending on what the book is that I'm reading, it usually, takes me a little bit longer, because I am actively practicing halfway down that page. What was it at the top of the page? How does it connect to what I just read? But we don't do that. We don't pause. And pausing is incredibly important in our learning. Take 10 seconds of pause, take up to 2 minutes, and you're getting neural repetition in the brain. Actual repetition of the neurons that you just stamped while you were learning. So that's another big one for learning, is take a pause. For my designers who are on this call right now, design in moments for people to stop. Facilitate the stop for them, because we don't do it naturally. This is why, again, I'm going to talk about joining forces, because all of it is in there. You see how I've designed it through the facilitation of all of these things. And that's another thing, Rocio, is don't be afraid to be your own best facilitator. But we don't stop and design out I do. If I'm really serious about learning something, I'm actually designing out my own learning. What's my learning journey? But we don't do that. We don't stop and actually plan, strategize, and be intentional about how we're going to go about it. We just naturally behavior, like Lavinia said, 200 years of the same educational system. We just fall in. I'm going to read, I'm going to make my notes, I'm going to highlight, I'm going to look at my notes again, and then I'm going to forget it all in about a month. So more strategy, more intention, and use as many methods as you possibly can that are relevant.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna mispronounce your name. Devinder, is it?
Yes, please, Devinder.
Hi, Devinder.
I'm from Canada.
So am I.
How are you?
I'm great.
Okay, my question is very simple. I know it's not related exactly to what you are teaching. My question is how to reduce, or what steps to be taken to reduce the short-term memories to be erased from the mind, from the brain.
It all comes down to rehearsal and practice. Now, if you're learning something specifically. The truth of the matter is, Devinder, is as we get older, we all are going to start experiencing neurodegeneration.
I know that. I'm old enough, I know. That's why I'm asking this question.
It's I think we just have to we got to just kind of take it easier on ourselves, right?
Because I have taken lots of steps otherwise, but still there are some doubts, what steps should we take to reduce the time limit of erasing those short-term memories or long-term bad memories, not good memories.
My friend, I know that there are probably several hundreds of scientists who work in the area of dementia and Alzheimer's who are working on this very question: is how do we slow down the rate? I wish I had those answers. I just truly don't. But here's what I can tell you, which is awesome. In a research study that compared the working memory of age group 65 and up, and then I think it was between 18 and 25, the 65 and up actually did better because their schemas were stronger.
Yeah.
So there's hope for us all. Use what you've already hold on to what you already know on them and make the assimilations to what you've already got. Keep building on those scaffolds in your brain.
No, I know. Thank you very much. But I have been experimenting with different issues, different ways how to reduce it. I thought I'll learn something more from you.
If it was my area of expertise, I'm sure I could give you a little bit more of it. Like I said, the working memory in the aging population is focus on that and focus on extracting how your organizational patterns are, and then build upon those. So I would ask yourself, Devinder, I'll leave you with this just before, because we've got to wrap up soon. But ask yourself something when you're sort of struggling, is how we often ask ourselves about, what do I know? What do I know? What I know? But ask yourself, how do I know it? How do I know it? Then you're tapping into the schemas.
I agree with you. I put this question for the younger generation, for the new generation to come up and start learning the process. That's why I put this question to you. Because there are so many people, young people here on the screen. I've seen it. So they should also know how to do it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We definitely need to keep our brains there, as well as the general population, and we are getting older and older, and we need to understand these things, how to design for another age. Thank you, Devinder. Thank you so much. And
it was a wonderful experience today. 1 hour.
Thank you.
Lauren,
thank
you.
You.
Lauren, you are great.
Yeah, I'm coming home, Devinder. Coming home to Toronto soon. So I'll see you
Anytime you're welcome. You come over.
Awesome.
Okay, all the time. Welcome there.
We're going to share Lauren's LinkedIn as well and her details.
I thought you were just, my address and my phone number. Like, no,
yeah, you can go to her house. Okay, everyone.
Lauren, you can find me on one of the ships anytime. I am also a traveler like that.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Okay, everyone. Miriam, I can see you have a question. If you don't mind asking it in the chat, maybe Lauren can have a look at it. We have 4 more minutes. We wanted to tell you something very, very quickly before we let you all go. You can find Lauren on LinkedIn. You can find her in her beautiful, beautiful course, Joining Forces with Your Brain. But you can also find her in a very awesome program that we're doing together called Designing Learning for the Brain. So we are putting neuroscience and learning program design together. It's gonna be a 6 weeks program where Lauren is going to be everywhere and you're going to hear a lot from her, and you are going to practice because yeah, it's important to practice, just like we heard today, and reflect and all of that. And because you were here, we're gonna leave you with this very nice surprise.
I don't like surprises. Oh, okay,
it's a good one. It's not for you, but it's a good one. So we will share over email with you a discount code offbeat30, which is going to give you 30% discount to Designing Learning for the Brain. So it's going to cost 1,000 euros, 6 weeks, live learning sessions every week, assignments, feedback from Lauren and from your peers, together with some high quality curated resources. You're going to learn about your brain. You're going to learn about how to learn better, because we did have this question, and also how to integrate science into learning design. So these 3 topics we're going to explore in depth in the 6 weeks that we will have together. And now this is us. We are Offbeat. We are learning always. We are learning from you. We are super open to yeah, just connect over LinkedIn. We have a beautiful newsletter. You can subscribe to that one as well. And we hope to see you in other setups as well. Oh, it was really great. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you, Lauren, for being with us. And yeah, hopefully we will meet all of you somehow at some point more personally. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
Have a nice
All the
day.
best.
Have a nice evening. Have a nice morning, depending on where you are. Thank you so much.